I'm Vani Shukla. Welcome to Garden and Nature Southwest. Today is something that I'm really passionate about, and it's about our connection with nature. We have evolved with nature, our health and well-being depends on it, and intuitively we all know about this. However, our modern life default is all indoors. All our activities, our responsibilities, they're all indoors. So if we want to spend some time outdoors, we have to make that extra effort. And if this extra effort now has become your habit, it has very comfortably made a place in your daily schedule, then too you might be thinking you love nature and you want to spend a little bit more time outdoors, but it is so difficult to create that extra time. Or your life might be such that you might find it very difficult to find even 15 minutes of time outdoors on a daily basis, even though you know you should do that. So my intention today with this episode is to give you that little bit of motivation by providing you some fascinating examples on how nature affects us, how deeply interconnected we are, and I'll highlight some scientific studies. And also I want to share with you some tips from my own experience over the years on how I have continued to increase that outdoor time for myself, for my family, without compromising the daily tasks that need to be done. In other words, without the pressure of trying to find that extra time for outdoors. So I'm sure you know about how nature and being outdoors, it helps to relieve our stress. And there's so many studies also, hundreds and hundreds of studies that have been done, some small, some of them big, on how nature affects our mental well-being, our emotional health, also our cognition, our memory, our intellectual capacity, and so many more things, our attention, our focus, both in adults and children who were exposed to green spaces at their school or near their homes. They had better focus, better attention, they were calmer. Same thing with the adults. Studies have shown that taking a walk in nature or being exposed to green spaces or blue spaces. The blue spaces mentioned in these studies refer to exposure to oceans, lakes, ponds, any water bodies. And green spaces, of course, is self-explanatory. But there have been many studies about something called forest bathing, meaning people taking a walk in nature in forest, or even in urban environments, taking a walk out in nature if you have some green spaces nearby. And these exposures to green and blue spaces showed improvement in the working memory. Working memory is something that you use on an everyday basis. If you have to, let's say, for example, you're doing something and somebody else gives you a couple of instructions and you have to remember them, that requires working memory. We need that in our day-to-day functioning. And of course, and by the way, exposure to nature, a lot of these studies have been on green spaces and blue spaces, but thankfully there have been some studies on desert landscapes as well, and they have also shown the similar benefit of nature. So again, coming back to the cognition, exposure to nature improves our attention, our focus. And in our busy lives these days, we are always looking for ways to improve our attention and focus, whether it's supplements or herbs or trying new exercises or meditation. Any ways we can get more efficient, we want to learn to do that. And exposure to nature is something that naturally does that for us. Maybe you have experienced it sometimes, that maybe you're working on something creative, you're trying to come up with some idea, it does not feel right, your head starts to feel heavy. This has definitely happened to me multiple times, and sometimes I just go out and take a walk. Because those long walks, sometimes, I don't know, they just do something to clear my head, to make space for those new ideas to come in. Sometimes the idea just pops up as I'm walking. Sometimes it's when I come back from a walk that I feel refreshed again and I come up with better ideas. When I feel that block, or even sometimes when I know I have to work on something but I'm feeling that inertia, I'm not able to start, I know the walk is going to work so well that I go out for a walk. Now, one thing is that when you know something works, you are tempted to expect. And that is something that definitely happens to me. As I start out for a walk, I am tempted to expect that, okay, I am going to get the motivation for sitting down again and working on that project, or I expect that idea to pop in that I've been looking for. But I have also learned that the best clarity, the best ideas come from when I'm not expecting, when my mind is clear, when I let go of that temptation, that expectation. So I just go on that hike, and as I start the hike, every now and then that thought pops up about the project I'm working on, about the idea I'm thinking about. But then I just let it go and try to soak in the nature that is in front of me, the vast landscape, the hills, the mountains, beautiful sloping hills with dried grass and other vegetation, with yuccas or nopales here and there, or the morning sun hitting the grass or the creosote bush and creating this magical pattern of sun and shade, amazing view of the sloping hills dipping down into the arroyos. It's just magical when you lose yourself in that nature. And as I continue to hike and walk, those thoughts, those expectations, all of those continue to fade away. And I soak in more and more of what is there. This morning it was so beautiful to watch those clouds floating by us, and they seemed to move so fast for some reason. I don't know. It was just a strange feeling. But it is good to be out in nature. It is just good. And when you come back, sometimes there is no new idea. But somehow it still feels okay. And somehow the project that you wanted to work on, you start doing that with a little bit more calmness, with a little bit more, with more of a sense of it's all fine. And when you start working on something with that sort of mindset, with that attitude, it is always better. It always turns out better than the previous one anyway. So whether I get that new idea or not, I still like the feeling of working on something after I've had that long walk or a hike. The long walks and hikes also work when I am not feeling so good, when I am weighed down by something that is troubling me. And again, when I start my hike, my walk, all these thoughts keep popping up, but as the hike continues, they all fade away. And even though the troubles don't go away, even though it might not be that I am magically transformed now into a happy state of mind, but it definitely helps to shift the perspective even the slightest bit. And the more often I do this, more often I go out in nature, even that slight shift of perspective, even the slight lifting of that weight, little bit at a time, every day, it helps. It helps to bring you back to that more stable, calm state of mind where you can make better decisions, where you can feel better about yourself and the world around you. And there is a lot of science to back that up as well. There are many studies looking into that, whether nature exposure helps with depression or anxiety symptoms. And many studies have found a positive benefit. And you don't need any scientific study to really tell you that. We all have at some point in our life experienced that. Whether you have been in a garden or in nature or you've been on a vacation, there at least has been some moment where you have felt that relief, felt that sense of calmness, felt that weight lifted off you. But whenever you come across a scientific study also that shows something, it just reinforces your own experience, your own belief in your own experience. And sometimes you come across these findings that really fascinate you. Just helps increase the appreciation for nature. For example, recently I found out about something called phytoncides. So these phytoncides are volatile compounds that are released by plants. These are in air and they affect us. And so these phytoncides have different properties. And there's just not one phytoncide, there are different kinds of the different categories of phytoncides. And some of the properties would be, for example, anti-inflammatory property or analgesics, or they may help us to have a calming effect, anti-anxiety effect, sedative effect. Not that much that you really start to feel sleepy as you're walking, but But you know what I mean. I mean, it's just these affect us in a very subtle way that we may not even notice at that moment. Now, why does a plant release that? These are thought to be part of their own defense system to repel the pests or diseases or somehow, but they also help us. Now, these compounds have been known for many, many years, although when you look at the science on nature, relative to that, it's fairly recent. However, even more recently, there's a scientist, his name is Gary Paul Naban, he's in Arizona, and he wanted to look at if similar compounds are released by desert plants also. So he and his fellow scientists found about 115 volatile compounds that are released by these desert plants. And not all of these compounds were new compounds. Many of these compounds have already been known to science and they have been known to affect us in a positive way. But the discovery that was new and that was done by these scientists was that even the desert naturescapes, the desert plants, provide us with these helpful compounds. Now, a very interesting example that was given was about the creosote bush or the creosote. It's a bush that is so common in our desert southwest, and the natives who have lived here for thousands of years have known the medicinal properties of the plant. Also, if you have lived in desert for a while in our southwest region, you have probably come to appreciate a particular smell, a desert smell that occurs after the rain. And you may also know the connection between the creosote bush and that desert smell. The interesting new thing for me was that this actually is due to a fungus that lives on the creosote bush and it produces this chemical. It's called trans-caryophyllene, and this volatile compound released by this fungus that lives on the creosote bush is what causes that desert smell after the rain. This fungus has a very symbiotic relationship to this creosote bush. But there's so many of these things that have made any plant beneficial to us to have healing properties or medicinal properties. And it's so interesting to learn about these. The symbiotic relationship that exists between the microorganisms and the plants and then us. Now, what if you're thinking that where you live there is no green space or blue space, brown space, any sort of naturescape? Then what do? Could a garden give us the same benefit? And I can very well relate to that because now I'm fortunate that my city has places where I can go to experience nature. But when I was growing up, it was just urban environment. No green spaces or other large nature spaces nearby. I had not seen nature as you see nature in like vast spaces of nature. I had not experienced that except on only 2 occasions when I went on a vacation for a few days. And those moments were magical. But for the most of my life growing up, it was in the urban residential areas. However, even then, whenever I came across a garden that was beautiful, it just took me somewhere else. And you have probably experienced that too. When you go to a beautiful garden that is nicely designed, that has all those colors and textures, and there's just something about that sometimes that you cannot explain what it is, but it just makes you feel so good. And that's the magic of gardens. And this is something that has been appreciated by the scientific community as well. And that's the basis of the therapeutic gardens. In last several years, many hospitals, rehab centers, also psychiatric facilities, long-term elderly care, nursing homes, several of these places around the country and actually around the world, there are several places where they are making these therapeutic gardens because there is evidence that when people are exposed to these gardens, when they spend some time in these gardens, they have improvement in their symptoms, whether it's symptoms of depression or anxiety, or especially elderly suffering with dementia and other neurological diseases such as Parkinson's. So the clinical sciences have also recognized the benefits of these garden spaces. And this is also something not new. This was actually described and documented about 2 centuries ago by a psychiatrist, Dr. Benjamin Rush. He's also known as father of American psychiatry. He documented the benefits he saw in his patients when they had exposure to gardening or garden spaces. He recognized that their symptoms of depression and anxiety improved. Now, since then, there has been more and more work in this field, and definitely a lot more recognition. There are now professional architects who do just that. They design a therapeutic or healing garden. There is also American Horticultural Therapy Association. So this is definitely getting more recognition. However, it is not still as popular that you see it in each and every hospital that you go. However, benefit of a garden, whether you call it a therapy garden or it's a garden just in your backyard space, everybody knows the calming effect a garden has. Now, many of the plants that are used in the therapy gardens are already being used in our own garden spaces. And these are basic principles that we all know, that we all appreciate. They just specialize more into that. They just focus more and more into each of these elements, such as the colors, different fragrances, textures of the plants. It might be there might be a lot of medicinal plants specifically, but also the butterflies that visit the gardens, the bird sounds, all of that combined, the kind of mini nature space that is created is what is healing to us. So it is not essential to know about the specifics of a healing garden to create that healing effect in your own space. And many of these healing or therapeutic or calming properties, again, they are not yet discovered by science. So any plant that appeals to you and any design that you love and you can create in your garden space, that will be therapeutic, that will be healing. The only thing I guess I will mention is to look into avoiding any plants that might be invasive, because sometimes we may not realize these plants become so popular in nurseries, but they might end up being actually invasive in the area. So that is something definitely to avoid, and if possible to do more native plants, because I think even from a healing or a therapeutic standpoint, these native plants again have evolved in the particular area. They will be bringing in a lot of these birds and beautiful native butterflies and bees and other insects. So I think the garden would be more full of life if it has more and more native plants. But it again, um, all plants, as long as they're not invasive in the area, I think any plant that appeals to you is good. Herbal plants, vegetable plants, any kind of garden has that therapeutic effect. And creating some areas, some corners in the garden where you have a little bench or a little space to sit down, making a little cozy corner here and there, all those little effects also help to create that feeling of calmness. Now, all that is good. But how about the time that is so difficult to find in our busy lives? Where do you get that from? So, this is something that initially we all have to make a little bit extra effort. But from that initial effort onwards, there are several things that we can do to continue to increase our outdoor time. So, what do I mean by that initial effort? Well, initial effort means that initial motivation, that initial intention to spend the time outdoors. It may be 10 minutes to start with if you have no outdoor time currently. So, it might be just the intention that you're going to be spending 10 minutes outdoors. Now, with that intent, you will initially be prioritizing a little bit. You might be able to find 10 minutes somewhere if you look into your schedule, cutting some television time or some screen time. It could be anything, cutting from that, and going out for a walk and mainly paying attention to the breeze, to looking at the plants, hearing the sounds of birds, and all that. Now, let's say if your schedule is such that you really do not have that extra time because you're not spending any time on TV, you're not spending any time on any kind of screen other than for work. Or you might be already spending some time outdoors, maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours exercising, walking, hiking, spending time in nature. And you might think that's the maximum you can take out from your daily schedule. There is no additional time. You love your time outdoors. You wish there was more time outdoors, but there's no other way. You can create more time. So, in those circumstances, adding a little bit here and there, it may not be a big chunk at a time, but being creative, just like with exercise and physical activity, we have to be creative these days. Parking your car further away or taking stairs, those kind of things. So, same way with outdoor nature exposure, we have to be creative sometimes. So, for example, at work, if you happen to have any place where you can take your laptop, sit under the tree, or if you have a bench somewhere close by, you happen to be a student and you have places in your campus that you can take your laptop and your and work over there, or eating lunch outside at the workplace. That is something doable for many of us. Just take your lunch and sit somewhere outside. So even if it is for 15 minutes, it is better than nothing. Other things that I routinely do to increase the outdoor time is, for example, having the coffee or breakfast in the morning outdoors in the patio instead of indoors. Once it becomes a habit, once you do it 3, 4, 5 times, and it starts to become a habit, a routine, then you don't have to remind yourself. You automatically pick up your coffee and breakfast and you step outside. I also do that with lunch and dinner whenever I'm home. And of course, it's true that it cannot happen all the time. There are days that it's very windy and dusty or the weather is just super bad. But the good thing about being in the Southwest, we have lots of days that are okay to sit and have your meals outdoors. It may not be the perfect condition, but it is not bad either. And of course, there are days that are exceptionally beautiful also. So always those to be enjoyed. Now, the other thing that really increases your outdoor time is if you have any sort of work that you do at home on your laptop, then just sit outside with your laptop and do that work. When you get into the habit of doing your work at your desk in a certain place, we become accustomed to doing just that every day. We feel that's when we are going to be productive. However, a same little corner can be created in your outdoor space. It doesn't have to be fancy. It's more mental rather than physical space. The mental intention that this is going to be my space that I'm going to work at. Just like we go to a coffee shop sometimes to do a work or a study, if you think about it, that's also a crowded place, music playing, noises, background hum, yet that sometimes seems to be the perfect place to concentrate, to focus. How does that happen? I think a lot has to do with our expectations, our intention of going to this place and working. And another super important thing is our association that we form with that particular place. Also, sometimes getting away from our daily routine environment and going to a different place, even though it might be noisier or very different from our usual environment, just changing that environment changes our mental focus as well. So, if you bring all those things to any corner in your outdoor space, to any place in your outdoor patio, that will work as well. And that will be really good amount of time, especially any time you spend on computer or books. Having all of that outdoors, doing all of those outdoors can definitely increase so much of your outdoor time. Now, is that really beneficial? You sitting in front of the computer screen, sure, you're sitting outdoors, but you're working. Yes, I definitely believe so. Because, yes, in that situation, you're not really trying to have a sort of a meditative effect and have that calming effect from the plants and, experiencing the different textures and paying attention to the butterflies and the bird sounds and all that. You're not doing that. You're focusing on your work and you're staring at the screen. However, there's so many other benefits of just being outdoors. The fresh air. There's different microbiome outdoors compared to what you have indoors. The bacteria, the microorganisms that you're exposed to, they interact with us, they affect us. The smells and the sounds of outdoors, they all, in some ways, in the background, are affecting our brain. And even if you think about those volatile compounds, well, those volatile compounds, if you have a garden space, they are coming to you, whether you're staring at the screen or whatnot. And of course, another thing, the natural light. There's so much evidence now on the natural light, how that affects our circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is something that is essential to the functioning of each and every cell of our body. Also, how the natural light affects our sleep-wake cycle and how it affects our brain chemistry when it comes to sleep. So all those things are passively affecting us, even though we are not actively trying to seek that when we are working, sitting on a desk outdoors, but it is definitely a whole lot better than sitting in an indoor environment. And sometimes what I found, especially if I have worked for long hours outdoors, say for example, I'm outdoors working on the computer for about 4 or 5 hours. If I am indoors sitting on my desk working for 4 hours, very often I stay seated for a longer duration. However, when I'm outdoors, um, even though I am fully focused on the work, yet every so often a sound of a bird or something catches my attention. I get up, I walk around for a few minutes. It does not distract me completely from my work. It's not that I'm not able to bring my focus back again to my work. I am. But that short moment also encouraged me, prompted me to get up from my chair, not thinking about any health reasons at that time. You know how we know that it is important for us to not stay seated for a long time, and we should make sure that we're standing up, but walking around a little bit every now and then when we are working on when we are on our desks. Well, there in the outdoors, you don't have to remind yourself about your health. It just happens automatically. And after a few moments, a break, you come back and you start working again. It is refreshing in ways. Then I might decide to go in and get a cup of water or get a cup of coffee or something and sit down and work again. And it's very nice. It's just a matter of remembering to do the work that you do it outdoors. And that's just the initial thing. Once you get into the habit of it, when you're sitting to work, you'll automatically want to go outside. That will become your default. Another thing that I'm experimenting with these days is try to do the routine cooking outdoors. This is something that I am still trying to find a way that is efficient and smooth. It has gotten better. 2021 is when I thought about actively making that effort of doing the routine cooking. By routine cooking, I mean not like just once in a while you're doing something on the grill or the stove, something special, or on a weekend. Not that. Rather, the daytime cooking, instead of being indoors, can it be outdoors? So in 2021, I started to make that effort. I still could not find a way that was easy. In 2022, it got better because mainly the hurdle is that you have to carry the supplies and everything outdoors, do that, and then carry that back indoors. That was the main hurdle. And in any kind of work, when we are busy, we want to make it very efficient, smooth, effortless. That's, or as less effort as possible. So that extra thing was the hurdle. So last year, I made several more changes, and that made it a lot better that we were able to do a lot of our routine cooking outdoors during the warmer months from spring through fall. And some of these changes are about having some simple supplies, utensils, pans outdoors. Not a whole lot. Something very essential, because if you have a whole lot of stuff outdoors, then it's the cleaning and the dusting and all that outdoors. It's not feasible. It just creates more work. So very essential supplies. Something like you would go on a camping with or going for a picnic. Also, having these things in a plastic container, for example, utensils in a small clear plastic container or any sort of container. It doesn't have to be plastic. I just used the things that I had in my house already. So having the utensils and these things in a closed container basically prevents things getting all dusty and dirty. And the only thing that I invested in and that was definitely worthwhile was to get a small induction stove, the portable small type that you can put on your countertop. And these are not super expensive. There's so many companies out there, and depending on the features and the company, it might be anywhere from $25 to $100 or $200. So there's so many out there. But this was something that proved to be very helpful. because the big grill or the stove is is although not bad, but for the daily routine cooking, it's not that convenient either. And I also believe that we don't have to spend and buy new things just to have more outdoor living. We can try it with things that we already have, because many times you'll find that this thing that you thought will work will not be working, and then you'll end up throwing it. So only after you've come up with a routine, only after you've identified that, okay, this is something that I really need, then you go and look for that specific thing. Otherwise, it's best to start with things you already have indoors, and you can probably repurpose it and use it outdoors. So this year too, I will continue to try out new things to make it more efficient and smooth, such that it easily becomes a routine part of life. So the routine cooking outdoors is one, but apart from that, there are other things that can be done super easily outdoors without requiring any major effort. Only thing it requires is for you to remember to do it outdoors. Is, for example, if you're talking on a phone with a friend, sit outdoors and talk. Or if you're doing homework with your kids, do it outdoors. If you have any hobby, crocheting, knitting, sewing, whatever. So, practically anything that you do by sitting indoors can be done sitting outdoors. Only thing required is to remember to do it outdoors. And that is only initial. After a few times, you won't need to remind yourself to go outdoors. Now, let's say if you're a gardener, you have a lot of times that you spend outdoors, or if you play a sport, or if you bike or hike, and that is really good. But even then, all these routine activities, any of those, if they can be done outdoors, then that gives you even more additional time that you can spend outdoors that will give you that benefit of outdoor space. So, what I wanted to convey to you today with all this is a little reminder, a little dose of motivation for you to maybe come up with your own ideas how you can increase that time. And that outdoor time is not only beneficial to us, but also to the nature as well. Because the more we are in touch with nature, the more we appreciate nature, more we care for it, more we educate our children to respect and appreciate nature. Well, so that is all for today. Until next time, thanks for listening. Bye bye.